Okay, council, it is 7 p.m. Can everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have roll call. Ms. Martinez, is it showing up?
No.
It's not showing up on my end either right now.
Mayor, if you click the middle button, see there's the home button and then the middle one.
Yes, and it has like 6 and it says close. So we could, for the sake of time, just go ahead and do a verbal roll call.
Counselor Griego? Counselor Daniel? Here. Counselor Vihil?
Here.
Mayor Coleman?
Here.
Counselor Carson?
Here.
Counselor Broyles?
Here.
Counselor Hensley? Here. All counselors present and a quorum has been declared.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have the agenda approval. Counselor Vihil?
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll hold off for a second. We're just having a few little technical issues right now, and we'll have Ms. Martinez take a verbal vote.
Counselor Griego?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel? Yes. Counselor Vihil?
Yes.
Mayor Coleman?
Yes.
Counselor Carson?
Yes.
Counselor Broyles?
Yes.
Counselor Hensley?
Yes.
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. We have citizen comments. This is the portion of the agenda where we ask any citizens who have any comments to come up to the podium, speak into the mic. We ask that you do keep your comments to within 3 minutes. We do have a clock that will be monitoring your time. If you're still talking at the 3-minute mark, I will politely ask you to end at that particular time. The first card I have is Alexander.
Hi, Mayor Coleman, board members.
Hi there.
Sorry about my voice. Let's see if the microphone picks it up. Hi. How's it going? Well, I was just sort of come back to, well, meetings are open again and stuff, so I haven't gone anywhere and I'm still willing to speak for my community and all that. I know DPG was shut down. Oh, okay. Sorry. And that I'm still there willing to discuss any issues with the homeless community and sort of mediate between the two, or I like to call it translating, because not all of them understand exactly what's going on with City Council and the city, you know? And I just thank you guys. And, that was an opportunity, and you guys did open up doors and ears of people that didn't know what to do or say.
Thank you. Up next, we have Ruthie Brown.
Good evening, Council. I want to say that last night at the Meet the Candidate night, I was gratified that the downtown traffic plan is still a hot topic, because it is. And I guess before I read you a few more comments, I also have a question on when a person comes in and asks questions, when do you ever get an answer? I've asked questions numerous times, and it's kind of like you're talking to the wall because no one ever responds, whether it's city council, administration, or whatever. Are we talking in the wind here? Or my questions are usually pretty serious, or sometimes I think one of the last couple meetings I even said, this is a real question. And part of it was about snow removal on downtown versus my little South Side business district. So I think you should let people know if they have questions, what do they have to do? Do they go to council and then council goes to administration and then administration comes back? Or do you go here or wherever? Because it's pretty confusing. But I know you're talking about the downtown traffic plan. So here's just, I didn't have time to go to all the businesses and get all the sheets, but I understand they're all still gathering a lot of signatures. Here's a few more comments that I've gathered up. Just about the worst plan ever. Cannot even open driver's side door. I thought Mike Mitchell's letter to the courier was exaggerating, but after driving downtown, he was actually being kind. Hate the new Main Street. Almost have been hit and almost hit a door. How did this ever get approved? Unsafe for handicapped people. When you talk handicapped people, handicap is not just being in a wheelchair or a walker. It might be someone old like me trying to get out of my car and jump over those little curbs. It's not easy. And it might be someone with just an oxygen tank. It might be someone with a bum knee. It's not nice saying, you need to go park on the corner. That's my opinion. Not safe for children. Very dangerous and unfair to handicapped. Very unsafe. Change it back. Looks terrible, cheap and unsafe. Parking is needed more than outside dining. An accident waiting to happen. Too dangerous and a waste of taxpayer dollars. And I guess I asked before and I have 10 seconds, but what is the insurance cap on this should someone gets hurt? And what is the city, the taxpayer's liability should someone get hurt or killed?
Thank you. Up next, we have Larry Jack.
Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. At the end of the last meeting I attended, you were talking about a phase 2 part of this downtown project. And from what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, phase 2 includes tearing out the curb and gutter and working on the drainage. And my question tonight is, if that is phase 2, why did we put all this other stuff in front of that? Why did we set everything else in place before we started in on the curb and gutter first? Are you not going to have to remove all that stuff first to get to the curb and gutter? Why? And I guess my question is, who's planning all this? Again, I commend you guys for trying to bring life back to downtown Alamosa. I think it's great. I still will stick to my 3 feet on each side, I believe, still needs done, but give and take. But I guess, do we have that kind of money that we can constantly redo things? You know, I kind of feel like we're putting the horse in front of the cart right now. If you're going to rip out curb and gutter, we probably shouldn't have put all the rest of this in place yet. To me, that would make it a lot easier to get to it. and work around rather than putting this in, taking it back out, tearing the curb and gutter out, putting it back in. I'm just curious as to why we did that. And thanks, guys. I appreciate you. And then again, I do appreciate what you're trying to do downtown. I really do. You know, it's needed something for a long time. But let's continue to work on this. I mean, we need to think a little more before we just act. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Aaron Mittenberger.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, Council. So really, I'm coming up here. I'm here for another thing later on tonight, but I thought I'd take a few minutes just to let you all know that we're doing a ribbon cutting for a teen-run arcade on State Avenue on Friday from 6 to 8. Really excited to be downtown. I think there's a lot going on down there. Really love what the teens are doing. So I'd like to invite all of you to come out to our ribbon cutting on Friday. We also have a gala, which is a big event for the Boys and Girls Club, to talk about all the work that we've been doing over the last year during COVID and everything to support young people and families. That's on the 30th of October from 5:30 to 7:30. That's going to be at the Boys and Girls Club. So I just wanted to come and invite you guys personally to those two events and say I really appreciate all you're doing for downtown.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Ms. Martinez, these are all of the cards I have. So let's go ahead and go to the Zoom attendees and see if you have anyone who'd like to make some comments, okay? And if you can give them instructions on how to raise their hands, that would be appreciated.
Okay, if you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak for citizen comment, you'll raise your hand by using the raise your hand button on your app. If you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9 to raise your hand. And Mayor, it looks like I see one hand raised.
Okay. You can go ahead and invite that person in.
Okay, looks like they should be able to speak now.
Mayor and City Council, thank you for hearing from me. My name is Merida Zerby, and I am one of the local attorneys. I just wanted to have some brief input on the proposal to modify the statute to make jailable offenses if a defendant demands a jury trial. And I'm very concerned about how coercive the language in the proposed amendment appears.
Mayor, there is a public hearing scheduled in this meeting for that, which would be more appropriate for these comments.
Perfect. I'm happy to wait till then.
Okay, thank you. We'll give an opportunity when we open up the public hearing for comments, okay? Just stay on. Do we have any other comments? If you're on Zoom and you would like to raise your hand, please do so we can recognize you during this time of the citizen comment. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Ms. Martinez?
I do not see any hands raised either.
So we'll go ahead and close this segment on the agenda and then turn it back over to staff for follow-up.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a few questions that were raised that are probably most appropriately addressed when we do the review later on the agenda from a Main Street perspective. Oops, I'm getting some feedback. Let me turn this down. The general question in regards to Ms. Brown wanting to know when questions are going to be answered. She has alluded to in her articles in the paper emailing council and not getting responses. So I have no idea if that's occurring or not and any specificity related to that. In regards to coming to meetings, it frankly just depends on what type of question it is. There's times that it's a rhetorical question and an opinion. There's times that it's a question that I've stated will be covered, such as the presentation was going to be this time in regards to snow removal. And we have answered the question in regards to insurance, and I'll cover that under the presentation. I'll also cover the other gentleman's questions regarding phase 2 under the presentation as well. So that's all I have for staff follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Brooks. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda, ceremonial items, Domestic Violence Awareness Month Proclamation. Here on council, we take the opportunity to share in reading proclamations. And we're fortunate tonight to have Mayor Pro Tem Jan Vigil, who's reading this proclamation. But Ms. Martinez, will you please invite the participants, and if you can have them introduce themselves.
Did I miss anyone? Did I get them all?
I think that's everyone.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, did you all want to say anything before Councilor Vigil reads the proclamation?
Yes, so my name is Yvette Atencio and I am a bilingual victim advocate with TUCASA. I just wanted to thank City Council and all of the community members for their support. And we just wanted to bring awareness towards domestic violence and kind of just make sure people know that we're here to help and support anyone experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and also just to kind of fill you in a little bit, we're hoping to be able to tentatively hold an event on October 21st at 5:30. Just because everything going on with COVID, we're not sure if that's gonna happen yet for sure, but we'll keep everybody informed. And just thank you for reading the proclamation and supporting us.
You're welcome, and we thank you for everything you do. I'll go ahead and have Councilor Vigil read the proclamation, and then if any city council members would like to make any comments afterwards, we'll take those comments, okay? All right.
Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In the city of Alamosa, Colorado, in recognition of the important work done by survivors, domestic violence programs, and victim service providers, we urge all citizens to actively participate in the scheduled activities and programs sponsored by TUCASA and other community organizations to work toward the elimination of intimate partner violence. Whereas, in just one day across the United States and its territories, nearly 75,000 victims of domestic violence sought services from domestic violence programs and shelters. That same day, more than 9,000 requests for services, including emergency shelter, housing, transportation, childcare, and legal representation, could not be provided because programs lacked the resources to meet victims' needs. Whereas the impact of domestic violence is wide-ranging, directly affecting individuals and society as a whole, here in this community, throughout the United States and the world. And whereas racism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, and discrimination based on physical ability, nationality, or other factors help to perpetuate domestic violence and make finding safety even more difficult for some victims. Whereas the need for safe house continues to be rated as survivors' most urgent need, and whereas the city of Alamosa joins with others across Colorado and the nation in supporting victims of domestic violence, as well as programs, state coalitions, national organizations, and other agencies nationwide who are committed to increasing public awareness of domestic violence and sending a clear message to abusers that domestic violence is not tolerated in the city of Alamosa. Whereas domestic violence impacts millions of people each year, but it can be prevented. Preventing domestic violence requires the collective voice and power of individuals, families, institutions, and systems, each who adds a valuable and powerful component to transforming our communities. Now, therefore, Ty Coleman, the mayor of the city of Alamosa, and on behalf of the city council, do hereby proclaim October 21 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, given under the hand of the mayor and the seal of the city of Alamosa on the 6th day of October 2021.
Thank you, Councilor Vio. Thank you very much. So normally we would present this proclamation to you all, but since you're on Zoom, we cannot present it to you now, but if you reach out to Holly Martinez, we'll make a special arrangement to where you can get the proclamation, okay?
Sounds
All right.
good, thank you.
You're welcome. So what we're gonna do is we're going to have some of the councilor members make some comments at this particular time, okay? I don't know which one was first this time, but I'll go ahead and let Councilor Daniel start first, followed by Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
And I just really wanted to say thank you to the Two Casa team. You all have an extremely difficult job in challenging times. And we know that during COVID, domestic violence rates increased. It was harder to find children, human trafficking increased. Like the work that you all do is invaluable to our community, and it takes a special heart and a special caring. So thank you for doing that. I also just wanted, I know there have been some changes in your leadership over the last year, and we sometimes only get to talk to you during Proclamation Month. So just really wanted to remind everyone that you're still available 24/7 if there are domestic violence emergencies. And that number is 719-589-2465. And that you all can be reached, and you're very supportive to families, and you are able to really help them in their most kind of needed times of crisis. And I just wanted to say thank you and let you know your work is appreciated and valued in our community.
Thank you, Councilor Daniel. Councilor Hensley.
I would just add that everything that Counselor Daniel said, but that idea there that I'm really glad things have come where they have. I've stated it before. I was a victim of domestic violence over 30 years ago, not here, it was in a different state. But that idea that there was really nothing, nowhere to go to. You were very alone and felt like you did something wrong. And so I now have had friends and family, unfortunately, who have gone through situations as well. And I will say the staff at Two Casa is phenomenal. And it does take a special person to do that type of job, but it's a really needed job. And I just want you all to know how much I appreciate it. I know many people in the community appreciate it as well.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Any other comments before I wrap it up? Okay, I too would like to thank you all for all the hard work that you do. I personally know people who've reached out to me that I've had to share your contact information with. You all followed up and followed through with them and made a real lasting impression on them when they didn't have anywhere else to go. So continue to give people hope and continue to make a difference in the lives of those who are experiencing domestic violence. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Ms. Martinez. So up next on the agenda, we have consent calendar. Councilor Grego, did you have something you wanted to
No,
say?
I was gonna make the motion.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Consent
jump in there.
calendar A, okay.
I'll make the motion that we approve consent calendar, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to thank the city manager and our city finance director for making the changes in the summary of the financials. I appreciate that, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion, second, no further discussion. Please start voting. I think we might be missing one. Somebody push it again. Okay, thank you. We got it. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, and thank you, IT, for coming up here and fixing it so promptly. Appreciate that. Okay. Up next, under regular business, we have an update from HPAC.
Evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Andrea Bachman, and I am the Chair of the Historical Preservation Committee. So thank you for giving me a little bit of time this evening to share an update with you all. As you know, it's been a whirlwind of a year and maybe a year and a half, but through it all, HPAC has been able to do a lot in that amount of time. And so I just have a short list of updates I'd like to share with you all, and some of which stretch into last year, but I think are worth noting. So in April of 2020, Hobbytown was added to our local registry, which we're really excited about. And the building was built back in 1938 and is a great representation of the Art Deco period here in Alamosa. And however, because of the pandemic, we weren't able to present the Abbeys, the family that owns the building, their historical designation plaque. And so we were able to finally do that this past November. So that was exciting. And then in January of this year, Clifton Simmons with the city completed the virtual Alamosa Historic Walking Tour Guide. And I think Deacon Aspinwall may have presented that to you all, but I thought it was also worth noting. Don Thompson, Deacon, and Clifton all had a big role in that, and for that, we're really grateful for their efforts. The walking tour, I think, provides locals and visitors with a great way to experience the historic structures in Alamosa, both from the comfort of their home and also, while exploring downtown Alamosa. And then for those of you who are not familiar with this, you can find it on the city's website on HPAC's page. And then in February, myself and a couple other committee members attended the Saving Places virtual conference. That was really neat to be a part of. And it was put on by the Colorado Preservation Incorporated. And we got to hear from folks all across the state working in the profession, and also from a handful of folks here in the Valley. So it was really neat also to be a part of that and to hear what people have been up to. So aside from these things, we also have several projects in the pipeline, and one of which being the First Baptist Church. And we've been in contact with the owners there. We're still working with them. However, there are it'll take several $100,000 to help with the structural issues that are going on there. So right now we're looking at grants through the State Historical Fund in hopes to help cover some of those issues. However, if you all have any ideas or other pots of money we should be looking into, please let us know and we'll be happy to hear from you. And lastly, with the help of the Maestas Commemoration Committee, we are designing an interpretive sign to commemorate the Maestas case that took place here in Alamosa. And I think a very exciting thing, or very cool thing, is that Alamosa really is the birthplace for school desegregation in the US. And I was not aware of this before they brought it up. So I think, this is something that we should definitely celebrate. And so we're planning to place the sign at Zapata Park, which is where the historical location of the Hispanic school was. And we're very excited, to be a part of this and to celebrate the important local history that we have here. So on behalf of HPAC, I'd really like to thank you for your time this evening and also for your continued support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrea. Before you sit down, we may have some comments from council. We
Absolutely.
started off with Councilor Vigil. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you're on that committee.
Yeah, I'm the liaison between the city and the HPAC, and just want to acknowledge all the hard work you guys have done and how you've had to pivot over the last 18 months, especially with that virtual tour. I think that's really cool for our city, and you can enjoy it from the comfort of your couch.
Definitely.
I just want to, and I've said this before, but I just want council to know that this group does meet, you know, at their regular meeting times, but they'll spend a lot of times in between that having work sessions and meeting with folks about their historical buildings and trying to help them get on that registry. So just kudos to you and your group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other comments? Andrea, I know you do a wonderful job. I see you throughout the city all the time. So I appreciate your hard work and dedication and commitment to this group, and keep up the good work.
Definitely. Thank you all.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for the update. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, the Main Street Advisory Committee Board appointments. Ms. Martinez?
Okay, council, so this is for you guys to make an appointment and to vote for an appointment for one applicant to the Main Street Advisory Committee to serve as the hospitality industry representative. You guys did vote on this at your previous meeting on September 15th. However, it was a tied vote, so we're going to have it come up again. There's currently the one vacancy left on the Main Street Advisory Committee for the hospitality industry. We had 2 applicants apply for this position, Mark Martinez and Jason Trujillo. And the term on this vacancy will end 6/1 of 2024. So you do need to vote, and I placed your ballots in front of you. So if you guys will do that vote and pass them down to me, and then I can count them.
No, that's mine. It's in your papers.
Okay, so after that vote, you guys did appoint Jason Trujillo to serve in this position. So if I can have a motion to appoint him, that'd be great.
Okay, Council Griego,
I'll make the motion. We appoint Jason Trujillo to the Main Street Advisory Committee Board.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Start voting, please. Ms. Martinez,
The motion carried unanimously.
thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. Business brought forward by city staff, city manager legal, discussion and direction on Main Street design.
Thank you, Mayor. And we are tag teaming it because the city clerk will need to share it on her screen for us to be able to present it to Zoom. So here we go.
And if you don't mind, Ms. Brooks, if I could just let council know, we're going to allow you to go all the way through your presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll open it up for questions and discussion. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
And so this is not as long as some of the previous ones, because I know you guys have heard this information, but we do still get some questions related to the information that's presented. So there is a tiny bit of a recap. So the first slide we wanted to start with is just as a reminder that this was not designed for outside dining. It wasn't designed for outdoor shopping. It was designed to slow the traffic down. And it was specifically in response to the public input that guided the creation of the downtown plan that took over 16 to 18 months of public input. You might remember that plan, every step of the way, was voted on by individuals. To answer the question related to why is there a phase 1 and phase 2, the current estimate to extend the sidewalks is estimated at about $5 million. I think both the city, the consultant, and the community understood that that was a pretty big chunk of money and probably not realistic for us to do on the front end. Therefore, the consultant, and with buy-in and feedback from the public, presented or created what is known as phase 1. And so how can we create safety by slowing traffic down, by making people feel that they need to pay attention, they need to put their phone down, and they need to slow down? How can we accomplish that as the #1 goal identified by the community in the short term before we have $5 million to do this? Essentially, the only funding that goes into phase 1 that is not needed for phase 2 is the curbs. The restriping gets to stay the same. The outdoor seating that was purchased just goes on to the new sidewalk. The parklets can be retrofitted to still be an identified space for the restaurants, which is needed from a liquor license perspective. So really it's the curbs. That's the extent if there's a concern about wasted funding. And it's in order for us to meet what the public told us they wanted as the #1 project, which is to bring Main Street from 3 lanes down to 2. The parallel parking probably does feel more stressful. We took out that middle lane. And if you're not comfortable parallel parking, you feel like you're backing traffic up. And so I know for myself, there's times if there's traffic behind me, I park on a side street. Opening doors, people should always be looking at oncoming traffic and not opening the door under either design into traffic. And at all times, children should be supervised, including this design and the previous design. Holly, if you can go to the next slide. So this is the previous design. So if you're looking at this is 3 lanes. There's a lot of asphalt. People are needing to cross the 3 lanes of traffic. A lot of times one car might stop. The others wouldn't, which can cause an issue. Also, because of how this feels, this is why they call it traffic calming. It's done in a lot of communities. When you design streets, if it feels wide open like this, cars will travel at a higher speed. And that's what we were seeing, because even though the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, we were seeing speeds higher than that. And that's when it gets dangerous. That's when people don't feel safe crossing. And that's when they're not going to go downtown. There's also not as much of a sense of a downtown community in this previous design. It's a beautiful street to move traffic. That's what those 3 lanes did. Holly, if you'd like to go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like now. So you can see it does not feel like you want to go zooming through that. This is, you want to put your phone down. You want to pay attention to what's going on. If someone's going to try to parallel park, if someone might be opening the door without looking, and there's less space that someone needs to cross oncoming traffic. And so what we have seen is a dramatic decrease in the speed, which is exactly what we wanted to see. We have seen cars stopping for pedestrians. And again, the responsibility is still on us to do more education on that and do more enforcement, because pedestrians do have the right of way. But we are already seeing changes in the driving behavior. We've even seen on different occasions semis stopping for pedestrians, which has been great to see. So Holly, if you'd like to go to the next slide. Safety is one of the #1 things that's been brought up. As I've shared in previous meetings, we are tracking if this perception of needing to slow down is actually resulting in any actual safety considerations. So thus far, over the 66 days that the new design has been in place, we've had 0 calls from a fire perspective related to crashes. And from a police perspective, we've had only 2 incidents of a side swipe. In regards to liability and responsibility and those types of issues, as we've shared before, it's the responsibility of parked cars to park no more than 12 inches from the curb. If they are parked further out than that and they are sideswiped, they are the ones that will receive the ticket. If they are sideswiped and within 12 inches of the curb, then it would be the other vehicle. The other thing that the model traffic code covers from a responsibility perspective is you're not supposed to open the door into bike or vehicle traffic. So even under the previous design, I have the feeling maybe people didn't realize they're not supposed to open their doors if there's a bicycle or vehicle coming. We have issued tickets to people opening their doors into a bicycle lane and injuring a cyclist. So if someone opens their door into vehicle traffic, they would be the ones at fault in that situation. Holly, if you'd like to go to the next slide. So we've talked about it before. I think sometimes people in the community, maybe they don't believe us. So I want to make sure we put all the information up there. We have been working closely with CDOT this entire time, and they have been a great partner. They've been at the table even during the development of the downtown plan. We held meetings prior to the new design. They obviously approved the new design. We couldn't have touched the street without CDOT approval. And then they've been involved with us afterwards. Most recently, we did have a meeting on September 29th to finalize what we want to make as a joint recommendation to council tonight. So the recommendations I'll be getting to are joint recommendations from CDOT and city staff. From a CDOT perspective, who we've talked to is Julie Constant, who is the Regional Transportation Director, and Jennifer Allison, who is the CDOT Traffic and Safety Program Manager. So they are aware of this presentation and what we're getting ready to recommend to City Council and are in full agreement, and it's as part of their recommendations. Holly, if you can go to the next slide. So the first recommendation is we want to move the parking blocks closer to the curb by 1 foot on each side. We then, while we have to close the street down for this, we want to apply a fog seal. It's a light layer of oil to further cover up those old stripes. So if we're going to have the street closed, we want to go ahead and do another effort of a different treatment to cover up those old stripes. As we're covering up those old stripes, we also want to cover up the parking stripes and restripe the parking about a ½ foot closer to the parking lots. And so what that will do is it's still plenty of room to park. 8.5 feet before was more than what most vehicles are. By reducing it by a foot, it gives the perception, and again, that's what all this striping and all of this is trying to give the perception to guide behavior, to park even closer to those parking blocks. So the wider our parking is, the more likely they're going to be further away from the parking blocks and closer to the vehicles that are traveling. So that's why we want to push them even closer to those parking blocks. So then that will create a net effect of 1.5 feet on each side. However, what we want to do is we don't suddenly want those vehicles in the traveling lane be like, whoa, we got lots of room here, and accidentally side stripe, even though we've only had 2. We want to have a second lane that still makes it feel like it's 11 feet, which is what the lanes were before the design change. It's what the lanes are now. We want them to still be 11 feet. So that way, the traveling vehicles feel the need to stay closer to the center lane, away from the parked vehicles. The parked vehicles feel the need to be closer to the parking blocks to create that space between those 2 areas. So Holly, if you want to go to the next one. Now I had to giggle when Rachel created this. So this is just to give you a feel kind of what we're talking about, like the 2 lines. This isn't to scale, but it gives you a feel of what that might look like. The reason I giggled is this person might be parked further than 12 feet away from the blocks. I'm just going to say. So, but this is essentially where we're trying to keep the distance between these two areas. And so again, this is the recommendation from city staff and CDOT, but we have more because it wasn't just the parking blocks that the community has shared with you. So Holly, if you'd like to go to the next one. So the concern was expressed regarding ADA parking. And I think people were under the impression that we took a lot of ADA parking away with this new design. So this map is to help show that actually we only took 2 spots. Those are the 2 red ones that are identified up there. Those were the only 2 ADA spots that were removed. What staff is recommending is that we add 4 other spots. We took a look at the corners to identify where we felt ADA parking could be helpful from an access perspective. So we are proposing at those purple locations to add ADA parking. So it's a net gain of 4 spots. And then this is a map you've seen before. So you already see these other ones that are existing. But we also used this map previously to remind everyone of all the parking that is on the side streets and in the parking lots. And what we've been hearing is people just haven't realized that there's parking on the side streets or there's these parking lots. So we need to do more public education and relate it as it relates to these different parking options. The other thing though that is very, very common for downtowns, it's something they talk about nationally, is called the Walmart effect. And so Holly, if you'd like to go to the next slide. So right now, if you look at Walmart, you are walking about 525 feet sometimes, or maybe 250 if you get halfway there, whatever you want to say. But here is the distance from Walmart. People have gotten used to walking that for a big box store, but yet if they're not able to park right in front of the business downtown, they seem to get grumpy. And it's not unique to this design. This is common for all downtowns. And so what we wanted to do was to take this opportunity just to show what the radius is and how much of our parking is covered if people would be willing to not park right in front of the store that they might be stopping in, that parking on the side or in any of these city-owned parking lots still gets you closer or as close as when you're parking at Walmart. Holly, if you want to go to the next slide. The other items that have been brought up from the community and from some council members is to make sure that we have police out there to do some enforcement. If the point of this was to slow down, and we believe it's probably doing 80 to 90%, but I'll tell you, there's times I've been out there, and if there's not a lot of traffic, you'll still see some people speeding. So at least we've slowed down 80 to 90%, but police have already increased their enforcement to try to make sure people understand we are serious about this new design and the speed limits. The other item that has been brought up is the sight distance at the corners. And so what we're planning to do is to add signs on the stop signs. I don't have the exact wording yet, and we are working with CDOT. This is part of their recommendation as well. This is all together. Is that we add a sign that says something that after stopping, it encourages them to pull forward, because we do have the bulb outs. So they can pull forward more in order to get a better sight distance. The other thing is we may remove 1 or 2 spots. In regards to the comment that we needed parking, we agree. This design actually added parking to the downtown. So even if we take 1 or 2 spots away, we still have more parking than under the old design. And obviously, if it's for a safety issue from a sight distance perspective, that's more important than that 1 parking spot. The snow removals are in place, and they're actually the same as the ones that we were using previously, which is the plows come through, they plow it to the north. The CDOT responsibility is they've got a lot that they're doing, so they're getting through. So they're just getting it to the north, and then it's our crews that come and grab it and pick it up and go after that. So it goes into the parking spot there on the north, and that's been confirmed, and everything worked out with the local maintenance superintendent. The other item that has been brought up is paint fading kind of at that entry point. So we are continuing to look at that to see what different types of treatments we may want to do. And some of it could be, do we want to inlay some of it? And will that help it? It's just a matter of vehicle traffic going over it. The other is, do we have the right angle on that bulb out to where if we are restriping some of it, do we want to look at that angle? So it is something that we will be continuing to look at. I do want to say, oh, sorry, Holly. You would have thought I was ready for the next one, but I remembered I forgot something on the snow removal. So that is the snow removal of the highway. The part of the activated space is something that where we think we've got a game plan, but until we have the actual first snow, we don't know if that game plan is going to work or not. But we're going to have city staff out there. We're going to have some snow blowers. We're going to have other types of equipment, and we're going to figure out what works best. So we do have some of that already planned out, but again, this is our first time doing it around that seating and those types of things. And so it might take a few times for us to perfect it. Okay, Holly, thank you. And then I just wanted to end with the same slide that I had the previous time, is there are still additional improvements coming. We are still going to have those flashing pedestrian lights. We need to do that by the end of the year. So that is still happening. And for the wayfinding, we will be ordering those by the end of the year and most likely installing those in March or after the ground freeze. And with that, I am available for any questions.
Okay, so council, I know everyone, you are gonna want to talk tonight, so I'm gonna try to make sure I get everyone in the order. I see your mics. I saw Councilor Vehills first,
Jan, then Michael, then me.
then Councilor Carson, and then Councilor Daniel. We'll stick to that order for now. So if you could let them finish their questions in the first round, and then I'm quite sure we'll have another round of questions, but go ahead.
And Mayor, I'm sorry, there is one thing I did forget. If council gives approval tonight, CDOT and the city is there, we're already mobilized to where we would start next week on the work. So we would be moving quickly on this, and CDOT will be providing manpower and equipment along with our city crews.
Okay, thank you. I think that is really helpful information to know. Okay, Councilor Vehil?
Yeah, before my comments, I had two questions. One thing I didn't understand, on one of your slides, you said entry point, the paint is fading. I don't know what that means.
So as you're coming into the downtown and you cross the bridge and you're coming off of Denver and turning onto it, that's getting, traffic's driving on that paint a lot and wearing it off faster. And so we're monitoring that. We're gonna figure out is it something we have to keep reapplying the paint? Is it something we should grind it down and then paint it so it stays more? Epoxy, we're not sure we can use epoxy on what that material is. So there's just things we're looking at to monitor that and see what we need to do there.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, where the new curbs are at right now, especially on the south side of the street. I'm thinking about the area in front of Maywa and the Purple Pig, like they're already like kind of all off kilter, and some are already kind of breaking down in that. Is that because I'm assuming cars are running into those curbs and messing them up? What will happen, or what's the plan if we move? Like, are we gonna have sturdier new curbs there, is what I'm asking.
So we'll take a look at that. Harry, oh, did you want to come up?
So in that section there, we left the curb line loose. We didn't actually dial it into the asphalt. Our plan was, before unfortunate events happened, that we were going to have it go in and replace that storm inlet. It's clogged or collapsed. So we're going to use this access permit that we had at CDOT, get in there and repair that. So those were just set there temporary. And once we were able to repair that, we were going to go ahead and down.
Thank you, Harry.
Are you done? All right, Councilor Carson?
I just wanted to say I like the changes. I think they're pretty good. Quick comment to the point of the paint. When we were at CML, Rachel and I were talking to a sign designer, and the paint they deal with this kind of stuff. And she said there's an extreme shortage on paint, like a sturdy paint that would work on that off ramp, because the beads that go inside the reflective paint use medical grade oxygen. And so because of COVID, there's been a shortage in that ability to create that paint. So that may be a struggle right now, but I really like where you guys are going. So I just wanted to comment to that effect. But that may be the reason that the paint kind of is not great right now. So. hold
And
out
I
for
want to
good
make
paint.
sure, because I know that was a concern you had, so it's not off the radar. We just don't have the solution right now.
Gotcha. Thank you. I like the design.
Thank you, Counselor Carson. Counselor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you. First, I'm excited about what we saw, and I appreciate, Harry, your comments just now about the purple pig drainage, because that was going to be my question. I was out there, and I think that's a challenge. I do think, so I'm excited that we're adding more ADA spots, and I think that is important. But I think really, to Ms. Brown's point earlier, it's not necessarily people who have the ADA stickers. It's not necessarily the people who are in wheelchairs that have the trouble. And so I know we don't want to do, right now, we don't want, with the final version, we don't want to do curb cuts because of all of that. But is there a way to have space between some of the curbs that we have now at all for people to have easier access?
CDOT needs a continuous
It has to be
curb.
continuous.
So that's why the side street is the best place to park then, or a parking lot. We need a continuous curb from a safety perspective, because when people are in that activated space, they let their guard down.
Okay.
And if there's no cars parked there, because if there's cars parked there, that serves as a barrier. But if there's no cars parked there, the only barrier from a safety perspective is the curb. It has to be a curb line.
Okay. I think her point was really valid. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. And I thank you for telling us why we couldn't have that, but I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Daniel. Counselor Griego.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank staff for listening to the people. You know, in a situation like this, it has to be a win-win. You both got to give. And the important thing is the safety, as you mentioned, you know, and a lot of people just take that for granted. And this will bring that to their attention. But I've heard that council doesn't, you know, if you come to council, they're not going to listen. They're going to just leave it the way it is. So I really commend staff for doing what you guys have done, you know, and worked with the CDOT and stuff. So we both have to work together, the community and the city, to make this successful. And I think it will, you know. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Griego. Counselor Hensley.
So I echo what everyone else has said, and I think it's great that we took that time, absorbed and listened to what everybody had to say and came up with the solutions. One thing right off the bat, I know you said, I think you said $5 million to do all of the different sidewalks or stuff like that. Is it possible to do it in smaller increments, or is it something that really, when it comes time, it needs to be one big job?
I would need to talk to Harry and Rachel and probably an engineer, because the big expense is the underground. And I don't know where all the lines are. And so if you can change one storm sewer per block and it ties in, and you don't have to change all the rest of it at the same time. So that's what the big driver is, and would dictate if we can piecemeal it as well. But that's the big cost, is you have to change your stormwater and anything else that's under there type of thing. And so it all depends on where the current lines are and how they connect in.
Awesome. And then on the, so I know you said that you're gonna redo or try to redo the paint, because I do know that glare when the sun shines on. So is that something we're thinking is going to help solve it, or something, you know, we're testing it, but it could still be an issue?
I'm not going to go on record saying we're 100% sure it's going to solve it. We really think that this is going to be a very good treatment. And if it doesn't, we will continue working on it.
And then the last question I have is the blinking crosswalks. How many of those are we getting?
So in total number, it's 4. And it's at the intersection of San Juan and 6th, San Juan and Hunt, and then not San Juan and Hunt, San Juan and Main, and then it's Hunt and 6th and Hunt and Main, which are the cultural trail and the festival trail.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, Council Carson.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to shamelessly kind of push my idea again about the boardwalk scenario to fill that and to be a temporary solution for the curb and gutter access, which is a much cheaper solution than spending $5 million. And the reason I want to reiterate it is because I went through Frisco this week and they have something like that between the buildings and the sidewalks and the street, and it looks really nice. And like I had talked to Harry, I think I mentioned it, and to Rachel as well. You could create a drop-in kind of pallet system that would fit between those, and it looks really good, and it gives it a really nice slick boardwalk effect. So I just wanted to shamelessly push that again. Also, we saw the cool signs that you can hit, the little springy ones they have in Pagosa. I think it would be good to spring for a couple of those too later.
So Rachel talked about
They're
that.
mobile.
Yeah, the Rachel,
Sorry.
oh, we might be talking about two different things then. We talked about the signs where you can hit, but we also want to double check at what speeds those were, like, if there's, when they make the signs, they'll have what speeds they're okay for and what street speeds they're not okay for. So
They
we
have
just
some
want-
ones that are on springs that you can actually, even for events, just pick up and put in the middle of the street. Some towns leave them there. I know that I saw, I don't know if it's Walsenburg that has the temporary ones that they just leave them in the middle of the road. And Pagosa, some of them might be temporary, but they really help because they're kind of obnoxious right in the middle of the road. And so people would tend to slow down as well. But I did just want to push those two ideas again. Thank you. And it's about, I figured it out, it's probably under 300 grand to do those 3 blocks with really good composite boarding.
Thank you, Council Carson. Council Vio.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank you, Heather and CDOT, for listening to the folks, all the concerns that people have had here. And I think we've come to a win-win for everybody. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vio. Council Brawls.
I want to say, I think the slight changes will help a lot, and I appreciate that. And I wanted to draw people's attention to Pagosa Springs. If you go to Pagosa Springs, they've got 2 sharp turns. And if you measure the highway and where they parallel park, they have no biking lane. They're exactly the same measurement as we have here in this downtown project. So you find it works for other areas. And so it should work here. And again, I think we just need time to look at it. And the optics are different, but I think it's safer. And I think it'll benefit the downtown, not only the businesses, but people going downtown. I think it'll help a lot. And I like the fact, because I used to go across the street from the bank, and that 3-lane, you had to hustle. And the other day, I actually was able to walk across it and feel like I didn't have to rush to get past the traffic. So I think we just need time and get used to the optics. And so I want to thank, and I thank the city staff and the manager for making those slight changes. I think they'll help a lot.
Thank you, Council Brawls. Council Carson.
Walsenburg's is a little more treacherous than ours is right now. I saw that the other day. So just as a note, it's good though. With all that being said, I really think these slight changes and looking at them will make a difference, like Councilor Broyle said. So I'll make a motion that we move forward with these changes and direct staff to go ahead and rock and roll on this.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Since I didn't get a chance to make a comment, I'll go ahead and make my comments right now. I would like to thank our city managers, city staff, and the team at CDOT for having these conversations and trying to make sure that not only we were making a decision based on safety, but functionability as well. And it seems like we've come to a solution that's going to help ease the concerns that a lot of people had in the community. I know as a council, we try to do our best to listen to our constituents and make sure that we implement strategies and policies that's going to be the benefit of the majority of people. Not all of our decisions please 100% of the people, and I'm quite sure 100% of the people won't be pleased after this motion. But the goal is to do our best to make sure we please the majority of the people and to represent our constituents. The other thing is I'm very pleased to hear that staff is not just going to stop at this point. We are going to continue to monitor and see where we can continue to make improvements. So this is not the end of the conversations, but we're going to continue to have conversations in regards to making sure that we monitor certain things. I'm also happy that we're going to gain, if I'm not mistaken, 4 new ADA parking. I was listening for the ADA parking slots for people. And I think that's very important because we've all heard those concerns. And the more importantly, I'm very, very impressed to hear that you mentioned the City Manager Brooks, that CDOT, they're already ready to work with our city's crew to start work within a week or so before the weather gets bad. So it's not something that council our staff is trying to push off. It's something that we feel is important now. So we're going to start acting now on the changes that needs to be made in order for our constituents and the people who travel through our community to feel safe. So thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what you're going to continue to do in regards to making sure that we make additional improvements as needed. And thank you, council, as well. Council Griego.
Mayor, thank you. Just one more comment, if I may. We're going to have to educate the people how this works, and even you point out that we have signs, because we have a lot of parking downtown. It's just putting the right signage up there and putting it where people can see that, oh, look, oh, there's a park. Where am I going to, what's wrong with this parallel parking? There's a sign where I can walk, So I think through the education and the signage, I think that it's going to help out a lot on this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Griego. And I'm just going to add one thing to what Councilor Griego said about the education and signage. Trust me, I received my share of phone calls in regards to this Main Street. But one of the ones that I remember is a person called me and they said, Mayor, we're never going to park on First Main Street again, never ever, because of the traffic. That's what they said. But you know what we did? They said was we started parking on San Juan and we start parking behind the old JCPenney's, and we didn't even know that there was that much parking back there. We would have never known if they wouldn't have made these changes to Main Street. And so I think the signage, education would also let a lot of the local people know, hey, we really do have additional parking and there's ways to get to where you need to go at some of the alternative parking spots. Okay. All right, so we have a motion, second, no further discussion. Let's go ahead and get ready to start voting here. Okay, Ms. Martinez.
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 17-2021.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the public hearing and second reading on the rolling coal ordinance. And as we discussed at your last meeting when this was introduced on first reading, this is an ordinance that mirrors the state law on rolling coal, which is creating a nuisance exhibition of motor vehicle exhaust. The difference between the ordinance and state statute is the addition of the word nuisance or into the otherwise verbatim language from the state statute. So this ordinance would prohibit exhibition of motor vehicle exhaust that creates a nuisance or hazard to a driver, bicyclist, or pedestrian. And so under the alternatives, the recommended one is to approve the ordinance as written. You could take out that differentiating language that makes this a little bit more stringent than the state statute, because a nuisance obviously is less of an imposition than a hazard. It's staff's position that in this time of increasing road rage, intentional emissions to annoy other highway users are not good things to have. The reason to create this as an ordinance is that it brings it for enforcement under the city's municipal court system, which is a much simpler, quicker, lighter way to address it than going through state court and the DA's office through the state statutes. The other thing I wanted to point out, we did discuss this on first reading, is this does not go into the model traffic code, which is where most of our driving regulations are, but rather into chapter 19, which are where some other traffic regulations are, and similar to the way that the state has it set up, where this rolling coal prohibition is actually in state statute under provisions governing emissions, rather than under the state equivalent of what's in the model traffic code. So unless there are other questions, I think we're ready for a public hearing.
Okay, at this time, I will open up a public hearing for ordinance number 17/2021, an ordinance adopting a prohibition on rolling coal consistent with CRS 42-4-314-6. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to come up to the podium? Go ahead, please. Make your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Aaron Miltenberger. Sorry, I didn't know that that was me or somebody else. So I really appreciate council thinking about this. I appreciate the city legal team bringing this to your attention as well. Since I've lived in Alamosa, I can think of at least a dozen times when myself and my family have been either walking downtown or biking downtown and had somebody roll coal on us. Probably the most memorable time was about 3 months ago when I was on bikes with my family. It's before the change in the traffic plan downtown. We no longer bike on Main Street. And a large truck rolled coal, and my daughter, who is 8 years old, freaked out and started swerving and nearly swerved into traffic. It was really frightening for me. Most recently, it happened just a week ago. I was standing outside of Hobbytown with Matt Abbey talking about this exact ordinance and talking about the noise that happens reflecting off of the glass at his business, as the teen arcade also has a similar large glass front. And it was completely debilitating. Our conversation stopped. We couldn't talk for 15 seconds until the car finished its exhibitionary behavior. And so I certainly appreciate council bringing this up. I fully support this. The question that I have is, what does enforcement look like? You know, it is something that happens so fast. And especially if you're driving in another vehicle, you don't want people pulling out their phones to try to get a driver's license or something like that. So I think that's my biggest question is how would enforcement happen? Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'll do, is anyone else in the audience would like to make any comments before I open it up to our Zoom participants, and then I'll turn it back over to our attorney for follow-up to that question. Ms. Martinez, can you give them instruction on how to raise their hand?
Yep. If you're on the Zoom app, just use the raise your hand button to speak at this moment. If you are on a telephone, you'll dial *9 to do that. Looks like I got one hand raised, Mayor.
Okay, if you could let that person in. Looks like it's Donnie Bautista.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, Council. Just a quick comment on the rolling coal. I just wanted to point out that a major event in the city is the Early Iron Festival that we just had. And I think that should be considered during, the voting process for this, or if there's any wording that needs to be changed, because we really don't want to turn off participants for that event. And I know it's a great event for the city, but that does happen quite a bit whenever that event is going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other people on Zoom who would like to raise their hand to make any comments before I turn it back over to our attorney? Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Sweezow so that he can answer the questions that were presented.
Well, I don't know that I can answer them, but thank you, Mayor. I think Mr. Miltenberger raises a good point, which is this is inherently a difficult ordinance, or in the case of the statute to enforce, because it is so transitory. So obviously, if there happens to be an officer present when that happens, that's the easiest way to have it enforced. Absent that, I think, I don't know, I may defer to Chief Anderson, but it could be a difficult, a difficult ordinance to enforce. Chief Anderson is on his way up.
So it's fairly simple. If that individual that did witness it, they can contact dispatch. If the officer's not present and witnessed it for himself, they can sign a complaint. We do prefer that they can identify the vehicle and the driver as well, because they will be the individual that's testifying on that case. Any questions for me?
I think that answered it. Thank you. And then the final comment, go ahead, Mr. Sweezow.
Right. So the other comment was, well, how does this relate to the early iron parade or slow cruise or whatever events the early iron may be having? And the wording of the ordinance is, shall not engage in a nuisance exhibition of motor vehicle exhaust, which is the knowing release of soot, smoke, or other particulate emissions from a motor vehicle, blah, 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 in a manner that obstructs or obscures another person's view of the roadway, or traffic control device, or otherwise creates a nuisance or hazard to a driver, bicyclist, or pedestrian. And I don't think that spectators along the slow cruise or along the parade are going to consider inadvertent emissions of old engine, leaky oil seals, or whatever it may be that causes some black smoke to emit from the tailpipe during that kind of event. That's not something the police are going to be writing a ticket for.
Okay.
I was just going to say that would be common sense, non-enforcement if it's a parade.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Carson?
Mayor, I make a motion that we,
Let me do this. I'm gonna close the hearing.
oh, you
again.
haven't closed it. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Go
I
ahead.
thought you were trying to
No,
respond.
I didn't
Okay.
realize we hadn't closed it. My apologies.
Okay, no worries. So I don't see any other participants, no hands raised, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council. Councilor Carson?
I make a motion that we approve ordinance 17-2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
One comment, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Once again, how do we get the word out? How do we educate the people, so they quit? So they know that we're gonna be looking for something like that. How do we do stuff like that? It's, you can only put it on the paper so much and Facebook or whatever, but I think it needs to, the word needs to get out that's not allowed.
So we can do a press release and some social media activity, but also we just discussed last week of trying to maybe revamp our public information a little bit. And one of those things is, did you know? And this could be a neat little tidbit that we put on that series as well.
Right, and just to add, again, this already is illegal under state statute. So it's not like it's a new thing that you can't do. It's just, if you do it now, we can deal with it in muni court rather than having to deal with it through the state court.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Daniel?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm sorry, I realized someone started voting, but I have a question about the nuisance or, and I don't want to get us completely derailed. But if it doesn't specifically match state statute, will we have trouble when I'm thinking of forward, right? Like to our next thing about how we're going to talk about what matches state statute and what doesn't. So if it doesn't match state statute and we have the nuisance added, will that cause us any challenges?
Well, I suppose we won't have the harbor if someone challenges this ordinance on the basis of unconstitutionality for some reason. We won't have the safe harbor of saying, well, look, it's the same as this state statute that's been on the books for 50 years. But other than that, no.
Okay, and would it be then a different like letter, like would nuisance be a different charge than hazard?
No, it's
Okay.
just a violation of ordinance number, whatever it ended up being, that would be charged.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. No further discussion. Please start voting. Ms. Martinez,
The motion carried unanimously.
thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, the second reading and public hearing of ordinance number 18-2021, an ordinance amending section 1-18 of the Code of Ordinances for the City of Alamosa and making charges that are otherwise non-jailable offenses jailable where the defendant has elected a jury trial based on a state statutory counterpart being a jailable offense.
So as we discussed, Mayor, when this was presented on first reading, back in 2018, the city decriminalized most of the city ordinances. And by that, what I mean is prior to then, any ordinance violation of the city ordinances could result in a fine up to, I forget the number, I think it was $2,650. It's the jurisdictional limit for municipal court, or jail of up to 364 days. And that was true of shoplifting, of littering, of jaywalking, of anything. And inappropriate for most of those. And so what council did in ordinance number 1/2018 was to say that jail is not an available sentencing option for ordinance violations, except for a handful, I think it's somewhere between 10 and 20 specific ordinance violations that council determined to be particularly dangerous or a particular damage to the public well-being. Those would remain jailable on a first offense. For everything else, no ordinance violation was jailable unless there were 4 violations of the same or a similar related ordinance within the space of 2 years. Then they became, at that point, jailable. We also have an ordinance that says that you are not entitled to a jury trial unless your charge is a jailable offense. And that second provision runs up against state statute, which says that you are entitled to jury trials in various circumstances. And let me clarify a couple things, because there were a couple questions from council at first reading that I want to make sure that we understand. There are no constitutional provisions for jury trials for offenses that are non-jailable. So the United States Constitution guarantees a jury trial for a criminal offense. And the United States Supreme Court has said that really only means serious criminal offenses, which are offenses that are jailable by 6 months or more. So there's no US constitutional provision providing the right to a jury trial for anything that the city has decriminalized. There is similarly no state constitutional provision providing for a jury trial for anything that doesn't carry a jailable offense. But there are state statutory provisions that do provide for that jury trial. And that's what gives rise to the genesis for the ordinance. The state statutory provisions are such that if there is a state analog of a municipal ordinance that is a jailable offense, then there is a right to a jury trial. The background for that is the state statutes also give the right to a jury trial, even though it's not in the Constitution. State statutes give the right to a jury trial for jailable offenses. So that's the state dividing line is the offense jailable or not? And then we have the state or state statutory provision that says, well, doesn't really matter if your municipal ordinance is not a jailable offense. If the counterpart under state law is jailable, then you're entitled to a jury trial. What that gave rise to or gives rise to is the ability for a defendant in, for instance, a very minor shoplifting charge. And we do get very minor shoplifting charges. We have shoplifting charges for amounts under $10 that the business owners are very adamant need to be prosecuted. Those, because there is a state statutory analog that allows for jail for theft, even though they're not jailable under municipal ordinance, those allow a jury trial to be requested by the defendant. And that is usually an all-day affair, usually involves a jury pool of 50 to 60 people. So a multi-hour affair for them, and ends up in a jury of 3 people. So the all-day affair for them. And the whole point, to my mind, of municipal court is to deal with low-level offenses in an efficient way, because they're low level. So the offenses are not serious in the greater scheme of things. I mean, they're serious, obviously, in their own context, and they're serious to the victim of those offenses. But the municipal court doesn't deal with murders. The municipal court doesn't deal with serious assaults. The municipal court doesn't deal with anything along those lines. And that's why the procedures tend to be streamlined and simple. And that should obtain for simple offenses like this. But because a defendant who is charged with something that has a state law counterpart that's jailable can request a jury trial, all of a sudden a simple matter becomes much more complicated, involved for not only the court, but the community who are drawn into that process as well. So the 2 things that this ordinance accomplishes, one of them I think is non-controversial, which is we need to amend the existing language that says you don't get a jury trial unless it's a jailable offense, because you do under certain circumstances. And then secondly, the issue of if you request a jury trial and it's for a non-jailable offense, and the reason that you are entitled to a jury trial is because under the state statute analog, it happens to be jailable, well, then it must be serious enough to you to be warranting a jury, and that means it's serious enough to have jail as an offense. And as Councilor Hensley asked, aren't you trying to make it more difficult or more serious for somebody to request a jury trial? And the answer is yes. I think there should be some proportionality there so that the intent of simplified municipal procedures is preserved.
And Counselor, not all of us have experience going through municipal court. Can you explain if a defendant they don't want to plead guilty, they want to plead not guilty, what does that look like if they're not requesting a jury? How do they handle pleading not guilty through municipal court?
So when a defendant is charged with an offense in municipal court, they're given an arraignment day, and we do those once a month. Everyone who was charged in the prior month or 6 weeks or whatever it is comes to court. They come before the judge and they are asked if they plead guilty or not guilty. If they plead guilty, the court will sentence them right there if the judge can, to keep things moving and simple so they don't have to come back. If they plead not guilty, then the matter is set for a trial. Those trials are set usually 3 to an hour. So the court is dealing with 3 trials in an hour. Sometimes those will go longer, and we run into the time frame. But that's the kind of time frame that generally you're looking at is 20 to 30 minutes for a simple municipal court trial. There's usually only one witness or maybe two, usually fairly non-controversial. And if they request then a jury trial, which they have to do within 20 days, 21 days of having entered their plea, then that gets set for a jury trial and to a jury of 3 people, and that is set for the entire day for the one trial. So there's a major difference in how those trials happen.
So if I want to plead not guilty, I can still present the information. I can still question any witnesses against me, but it would be the judge making the decision rather than the jury. Is that?
That's right. The judge makes the decision on whether the prosecution has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and is the finder of fact, as it's called. With a jury trial, the jury makes the decision on whether the prosecution has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what they do. Then they just give a guilty or not guilty verdict. And then the judge imposes the sentence based on the jury's finding of fact of guilty or not guilty. So in one, the judge is the fact finder. In the other, a jury of 3 or sometimes 6 persons is the fact finder.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sweezo. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and open up for a hearing for the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 1820-21, an ordinance amending section 1-18 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Alamosa and making charges that are otherwise non-jailable offenses jailable, where the defendant has elected a jury trial based on a state statutory counterpart being a jailable offense. What we're going to do this time is we're going to start with Zoom first, because I know there was a participant who wanted to make some comments. We'll open it up to that person first and any other participants on Zoom. And then I'm quite sure we have some people in the audience today who would like to make some comments as well. Okay. If Ms. Martinez, if you can give instructions.
Yes, sir. Okay, if you're on the Zoom app and you want to make a comment at this time, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 to do that. And it looks like I have one hand raised.
If you can invite that person in.
And she should be able to speak.
Okay. Go ahead. Can you hear us now?
Yes, can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, now we can. Mhm.
Okay, it's just a little disconcerting because my screen goes blank and I can't see you.
Okay.
So as I said earlier, my name's Merida Zerby, and I'm one of the local attorneys. I don't know a lot of you, and so just as a simple background, I've done criminal defense and family law down here for 10 years, but most recently I spent 2 years in the DA's office. One of those is the assistant district attorney. So I kind of come from this of all sides. By making whether jail is on the table contingent on a defendant's decision to take a jury trial, this is in essence creating a trial penalty. And it's a very specific trial penalty. It's a jury trial penalty. And that's a penalty that is a possibility a person will receive a harsher sentence if they exercise their right to a jury trial than if they take a trial to the court or take a guilty plea. When the code section at issue was amended in 2014, the language specifically recognized that punishment for offenses is done in classifications by severity. And your municipal code specifically asserted that local values and knowledge justified allowing deviations from the state sentencing guidelines. Then in 2018, as Mr. Shuiso talked about, there was the decriminalization of all but the most serious offenses, with exceptions for multiple priors. But it's clear not only was court and resource efficiency part of the decision, but also the acknowledgement that certain crimes are just not as serious and some of them don't justify jail as a punishment. If the city doesn't wish to expend the time and resources on jury trials for non-jailable offenses under the city code, it has another option. It can simply file all of those ordinance offenses with matching state offenses in county court. And frankly, the only ordinances I'm aware of that can't be filed in state court are zoning offenses, parking offenses, and animal offenses. However, the statute and the law as it's written does obligate the city to still provide the right to a jury trial because that right is so substantive and so important to protect. The purpose of a municipal court is to modify conduct by fairly rendering justice, and to adopt an ordinance that only puts jail on the table if you decide to go to jury trial, to combat an accusation by your government that you've done something wrong, that's not rendering justice fairly. It's unjustifiably coercive, and I believe instituting that will damage the city, both in terms of potential legal actions, by damaging its relationship with its citizens and visitors who will only see this in the frame of, the government is telling me to avoid possible jail, I have to surrender my right to a jury trial. That trial that lets citizens, other people like me, tell me whether or not I'm right or wrong, or the government is right or wrong. And City Council, I really don't think that's a PR fight that Alamosa wants or needs. I'm really concerned about this. And I think there are real constitutional issues. I would highly suggest not adopting this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Martinez, it looks like we have another hand raised. Okay, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
My name is Mark Jackson. I'm a local attorney as well. And I have actually tried cases not only here in Alamosa and in the Valley, but also all over the Western United States for a number of years. And this is the first time that I've ever seen or heard of an ordinance that is penalizing someone for exercising the right. And that is extremely concerning for myself as an attorney, but also as a citizen. And I think the fact that there is an attempt to, as Ms. Zerby was so eloquently stating, to penalize somebody for exercising this right, it's not only a PR issue, but with all due respect to Mr. Sweet's opinion, I think it is an extremely huge constitutional issue. And I believe it's going to raise a lot of issues that's going to cost the county and the city an exorbitant amount of money fighting this through the appellate system, which is going to happen. Because as soon as someone that exercises their right to a jury trial and then is found guilty and jailed because they exercised that right, that is going to be an immediate appeal. And I think that's going to cause a lot of problems. So I'll leave it at that. I strongly suggest that this not be adopted. I think it has some serious fundamental issues, and it's rather offensive to hear that someone is going to be penalized for exercising their not only statutory rights, but their constitutional rights. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you. Looks like we have another hand raised. Ms. Martin, okay, I guess that was that hand. Don't see any other hands raised. So we are going to leave Zoom and come to our real live hearing here in person. If you have any comments, anyone in the audience, feel free to walk up to the podium and make your comments.
Mayor, councilors, hello, my name's Carl Kienold. I'm a local attorney who's practiced criminal law for 13 years, 6 as a state prosecutor in Pueblo, and the last 7 as a criminal defense attorney. I'm here to adamantly object to the approval of this ordinance proffered by your city prosecutor. This ordinance could lead to absurd results, unfair process, constitutional and statutory violations of the law, and most importantly, coercive conduct by the government. Let's just think about how absurd this advisement would be. An advisement, again, it generally occurs at a client's first court appearance. An advisement informs the defendant of the possible charges against him or her and the possible penalties. If this ordinance were to pass, the judge would have to advise the defendant in your court something like this. And if you don't mind, I'm going to use you, Mr. Broyles. Mr. Broyles, you have been charged with harassment. Harassment is punishable by a fine unless you want to exercise your right to a jury trial, and then it's going to be punishable potentially by jail. So in other words, Mr. Broyles, if you want to meet with the city prosecutor and come to a plea agreement, or you just want to have a trial in front of me as the judge, the most I can do is fine you. But if you want to maintain your innocence and request a jury trial, you must understand I can sentence you to jail. The coercion the government would be partaking in is blatantly obvious and quite frankly unheard of. As Mr. Schwiesau informed the council at the first reading, he is unaware of any other municipalities having such an ordinance. There is a reason for that, because it would be unconstitutional, because it would be a violation of the due process of law and a violation to your right to a fair trial. I watched the first reading of this ordinance by Zoom, and it appeared to me that the majority of the councilors had apprehensions about this ordinance. You should not be merely apprehensive about this, but repulsed by it, particularly given the recent history of the municipal court and the reformations that it's had to go under. Passing this would be placing this court 5 steps backwards. Having a whopping 2 jury trials in almost a calendar year is not a burden financially or otherwise. It is important to note that the city has not even provided figures on what the actual costs of a jury trial are, or what other constitutional or statutory alternatives could be implemented in order to provide those jury trials in a more efficient or affordable manner. Having 2 jury trials is hardly grounds to support this terribly short-sighted idea. Approving this would only affirm what most criminal lawyers, including many prosecutors and people in the public, think of municipal courts, that they are not real courts and they're not a means to justice. I do not think any of you want to affirm that impression or provide that reality. If you are even remotely considering this law, I ask that you do more homework. Talk to any state prosecutor or state judge that you know and ask them what they think of this ordinance. I am very confident that they would tell you that it would not be the right thing to do to pass this law. And as the attorney who has done 2 of the 3 jury trials in this court this year, I have to tell you it's very concerning to me that simply because I happen to represent 2 people that wanted to go to trial, that has been such a burden for the city prosecutor that he had to go out of his way to come and write a law to try to avoid to do the job for which you have hired him to do. That and some of the stuff that I've observed in the trials I have done has caused me major concerns. Apart from the amazing staff that you have working that court, I do have problems with what's going on down there. And I do think that despite the reformations, it would behoove you to take a better look at exactly whether or not this court system is continuing to progress as you all wished it would when you decriminalized some of these cases or some of these charges in 2018. I ask that you do not pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Yeah, sorry. My name's Johanna Henley. I thought I only had 3 minutes, so I very Cliff Notes version of some fun legislation and regulation analysis and con law. But since I might have a little more time, I do want to point one thing out that really concerns me. But I will introduce myself first, actually. My name is Johanna Henley. I am a local attorney here in town. I work with Mr. Keenhold. But prior to this, I was a deputy district attorney here in Alamosa, and I was lucky enough to end my prosecutorial career in Alamosa District Court. I also do want to commend the staff here, and I was also one of the women present at the last city council meeting, who I think raised a bit of a stir due to this. Something that really concerns me is this discussion of proportionality. Proportionality does not go both ways in criminal courts. The state has the burden. Defendant does not have any burden. They don't ever have to put on a defense if they don't want to. That argument should just never be made. It's not an argument. Anyways, so obviously there are a litany of reasons that this law should never be passed, as everyone else has discussed here. But what I'd like to focus on is that I don't think it even accomplishes the goals that it set out to do, which, as Mr. Suiso pointed out, to alleviate resources and to fix this alleged inconsistency between the code and state statutes. I will note, I think there are some problems in the code. That being said, basically, I don't see how having only 3 short jury trials in an entire calendar year is overly exhaustive. See no statistics about the financial aspect of that. I don't see the problem there. But it's also my reading of the code that the city prosecutor already has this power. If you look at section 1-18D, it specifically states that the prosecutor has the ability to, simply by filing a motion with the court, elect to treat a non-jailable offense as jailable. That's exactly why we're here now, as far as I know. That has the exact same effect at the end of the day as this proposed ordinance. And I'm not entirely sure why that's not being discussed, but my guess is because city prosecutor is aware that is not legal. That is not a legal authority anymore, because of the decriminalization of many of the violations of the ordinance that this council did in 2018. So I'll discuss a little bit about why that specific portion of section 1-18 is not, and this proposed ordinance are unlawful. Essentially, the city prosecutor is claiming that this existing code is inconsistent with CRS 1310-114. This is just not true. As any first-year law student learns in con law, state and federal laws, and similarly state municipal laws sometimes appear to be inconsistent. That's why we have lawyers. That's what we're here for. We come in and we arrive at a logical interpretation of the statutes and codes at issue, given the respective sovereignty of the legislative bodies. CRS 1310-114 is not inconsistent with the code as it exists, nor does it also exist in a vacuum. CRS 1310-101 specifically states that the right to a trial by jury for petty offenses is of such vital concern to the people in the state that the General Assembly and only the General Assembly has jurisdiction over that matter. And the General Assembly has specifically acted on this in enacting CRS 1610-109 when it says that defendants shall, not may, shall be entitled to a jury trial when charged with a petty offense. So as the court in Rolstad, the case that Mr. Suiso cites in the discussion of why this law needs to be passed, made clear, municipalities cannot avoid the statutory requirement of a jury trial simply by creatively decriminalizing an ordinance that has a counterpart in the state criminal code. And even if a petty offense does not carry the possibility of jail in municipal court, as Mr. Suiso pointed out, it still triggers that right to a jury trial requirement under certain circumstances. Clearly, this council's intent in decriminalizing many ordinance violations in 2018 was not to creatively work around this. Obviously, or else we would not be here today. But now the city prosecutor is relying on the holding in Rolstad to try to do what it specifically disallows, using the municipal code to circumvent a defendant's right to a jury trial. I think it's also important to note that the court in Rolstad directly state that to do this would be to allow the forum in which an accused is tried to dictate his or her right to a jury trial, which is directly contrary to the legislative intent of the statutes I just cited. It's also important to note that language comes directly after the quote that the city prosecutor provided to you. There's context to all of this, and I think that the city council needs to take a closer examination at all of it. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I would also note, I do work with Mr. Keenhold, but I do share many of the concerns he voiced about municipal court. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, counselors. My name is Ben Pasiga. I'm also a local attorney. I might be unique in that I do not, with one exception, practice criminal law. I share a number of the concerns that were expressed earlier. I do understand the frustration with the time and energy that would have to go into securing a fine by a jury trial. But the context here is that there's a statutory right to a jury trial. I think that if there is an underlying problem, it would be that statute. I'm concerned that in operation, the statute would punish people for choosing to exercise that statutory right. that would create, in my view, the appearance of vindictiveness. I also am concerned that it appears to be a pretty transparent attempt to deter people from asking for jury trials. I do think that there's some case law suggesting that it raises concerns about due process, but at the end of the day, it's a moral question in my mind. I don't think it's right to punish people for exercising what they're entitled to under the law. So respectfully, I would ask that you not vote in favor of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to make any comments in regards to this in this public hearing before I close it? Okay, so I don't see anyone. So I will now officially close this public hearing and bring it back to our attorney and then back to council for comments.
Thank you, Mayor. As I stated at the outset, there is no constitutional right to a jury trial. So the concerns that the various lawyers have raised about constitutional issues are not concerns. There are issues that I think are potentially challengeable if someone were to elect a jury trial for an ordinance that was non-jailable under the city code and were to be found guilty and then were to be sentenced to jail. I think that that person would have a viable argument to make on appeal that the city's ordinance that made jailable something that otherwise would not have been is a violation of the state statutory guarantee of a right to a jury trial where there is a state counterpart to a jury trial. So the concern that there is an appealable issue is a valid concern. And if council were to pass this, there may be an appealable issue, and we might find out from a court of appeals that the ordinance runs afoul of those state statutory provisions. We won't know until that happens. My position is that is not the case. And with respect to resource issues, I will certainly agree that a limited number of jury trials is not a big imposition on the city's resources. That's not the issue here. The bigger concern is the imposition on the 50 to 60 citizens of Alamosa who get called into jury trials for very minor offenses, which is, I think, an abuse of the court system. So that's the intent to be fixed there. I do want to address Ms. Hensley's issue with respect to whether or not the current ordinance is inconsistent with those state statutory provisions. And in doing so, I actually found an ordinance provision that got left out of this ordinance. But anyway, the one that's in this ordinance is currently section 1-18 sub E of our code, which says that sub E sub 4, no accused shall have the right to a trial by jury for an alleged violation of a provision of the municipal code, which is defined to be a non-jailable offense. Now, state law trumps our municipal code, so in effect, it doesn't matter, but that is inconsistent with state law. We should change that. It turns out when I searched on jury, and I should have caught this when I drafted the ordinance, that we have another section that says essentially the same thing, and that is, let me do the search again, 13-57, which says under subsection B, no defendant shall have a right to a trial by jury for any non-criminal traffic infraction, nor for any violation that does not carry the possibility of the imposition of a sentence of incarceration. So that I would ask that on second reading, you amend the ordinance, no matter what you do with the entire ordinance, but that you amend that section 1 of the ordinance that takes out that provision that's currently in 118 sub E sub 4 and add taking out that provision in 13-57 sub B. So you would want to eliminate the phrase, nor for any violation that does not carry the possibility of the imposition of a sentence of incarceration.
Thank you, Mr. Sweezow. I'm gonna have council make comments. I have Councilor Carson, Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Daniel. Go ahead, Councilor Carson.
I have concerns, no matter how we vote on this. One of the reasons that when this was brought up, I supported it was because, you guys came up and the lawyers on the phone, several of you have worked at the DA's office. I have a concern that even with the decriminalization of some of the offenses we did a couple years ago, we've created a culture of no accountability. People think it's a farce, and we're dealing with it right now with fines. I mean, we constantly send police officers to Walmart or to other entities to deal with shoplifting on a minor scale that ends up costing taxpayers a ton of money. And my issue with this is that you give the ability to an offender, no matter at what scale it is, you give them the ability to drag this accountability out and use the system and abuse it to create a cushion for themselves. They've offended repeatedly. And trust me, I have kids and I don't want my kids thinking it's okay to shoplift repeatedly and get away with it because, the DA's office or whoever it's going to be is going to back them up in being able to get away with it. The problem is that by prolonging this and wasting taxpayer money, you also put another drain on the system. You're stealing from this business or committing a crime. Then you come into this municipal court and you use this ability to go to jury trial and drag this out. And like other people in the room have said, not only impose your issue on the court and the taxpayers, on other people that have to come in and sit through and be picked for a jury trial. Now, I am a huge and probably one of the biggest advocates in this room of rights, period. I really do not like government overreach at all. But the problem is that when we allow people to constantly make a joke about committing crimes, that's what it becomes. And we have no accountability. And right now in this country, that's a huge problem. We're letting people run rampant. And I don't agree that even some of the stuff that we've decriminalized, we should have, because I see it repeatedly. Like I said, you see the children in this community sometimes think that some of the laws are a farce. You have these big entities, getting, again, it's the bottom dollar. And I understand that they have money to make and a business to run. But with some of these offenses, I don't know what the dollar amount on the trials were. I know they were one of them was really small. And for a person to be able to abuse the system to that extent, I respect everybody here, but for a person to be able to abuse the system to that extent is kind of ridiculous, because then it gives the next guy the idea to do it. And I grew up here. And so I know a lot of people, and I know tons of people on the street, and I know people that would abuse this. And so that's what's a concern to me. So if we don't pass this, we need advice. We need, input from people on how to create a system where it isn't abused. Because I think it is a little ridiculous to drag somebody through trial for something this minor when they should just cop to it. If they committed an offense, cop to it and deal with it. Sometimes people just use tools like this to get away with doing crap that they're not supposed to. And that's what really bothers me about this. So, no matter how we vote on it, I want everybody here to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Daniel.
So I know at the last city council, I definitely spoke up because I definitely, when I was hearing this and I felt sort of the idea of rights not being acknowledged, things like that. Yes, there are people that abuse this. There's people that abuse a lot of things. Yes, there are challenges with accountability. I think there's a lot of things that from a culture standpoint that we definitely have to work on. And there's things that make me really sad, make me frustrated and things like that. but this isn't the situation to take care of that. So I look at it is that, yes, you may have 8 people who, or 9 people who abuse this, and that's really bad. But what about that one person who who maybe really didn't do the crime and wants to have their rights? And we have the right to a jury trial. And it could be even something where you say, well, you can just use the judge. But the thing being there is, what if you don't feel comfortable with that judge? And at this point, you know, I don't think we have a real concern, but what happens 10 years from now or 15 years from now, and this is on the books, and it's a judge that maybe you don't feel comfortable feeling like that they're not going to give you the fairness that you feel. And we have that right as an American citizen to be able to have the jury trial. So for me, what this comes down to is, yes, what you're saying, there are issues and there's things like that. And it really does suck that somebody who may be truly guilty and they're trying to abuse the system or make things tough. But that doesn't mean then we make rules or laws for that situation and not look at the person that really could have, I'm not even saying this right, but that deserves the right to be able to have that jury trial. So from the standpoint of morals, from the standpoint of that this is part of our right, and yes, it may suck to be on jury duty. I actually just got called to jury duty earlier this month, bigger trial, but that is also part of our duty as an American citizen. And I think, and yes, it may be frustrating to come in if it was a smaller type case, and we're all busy. I know how busy I am, but at the same time, that is one of, in a way, we look at it as a right as an American citizen. So for me, I'm definitely opposed to this. And mine, I probably made it more simpler than what the attorneys did, but that's for me the reason being.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Councilor Daniel, then Councilor Carson, because I'm not Councilor Carson, I'm sorry. Councilor Brawls, because his light doesn't work, okay?
Well, dang,
All right.
okay. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everyone. First of all, I feel like having this many lawyers in a space is challenging, but thank you. I want to be clear, though, we are not saying that people would not have jury trials. We were saying that their potential sentence would change if they have a jury trial, right? So but the point is that this could potentially coerce people into not asking for a jury trial because of that potential shift in their potential consequence, right? So I struggle with that because I feel like it's a bait and switch. So my struggle is still the same that it was last week when I brought this up. I do not think we should change the consequence because someone asked for a jury trial. I do think that we should be able to ask for jury trials regardless, because I think that's something people believe in and people want. My other concern is that if we do need to, because it sounds like, I think I understood from everyone, we do still need to change the code to state that nowhere in our code does it say you wouldn't be allowed a jury trial in our code. And I did not remember the numbers.
So Counselor Daniel, I think the attorney, he is drafting out potential language. So once everyone's given their comments, he might have some language to help move that along.
That would be, thank you, Counselor Sweezel, for that. I appreciate that. And thank you, Heather. So just like last week, team, I was not in favor of changing what their consequence could be. I'm still not in favor of that. I think people should be allowed to have a jury trial. I think that is part of our system. I agree with Counselor Hensley. And serving on a jury, municipal, county, state, whatever, all of those are things that we get to enjoy as part of this process and part of being a citizen in our country. And I think while that can be a pain in the butt for sure, it's also something that we should honor and be excited about and remind ourselves that participating in our justice system is something that we would all hope to be able to do. And one of the things that make what we do great. I also have thoughts about the potential for abuse of the system. You know, part of having a jury trial is being accountable. So I disagree that it wouldn't be holding someone accountable. I think that we have systems in place. People use the system either to their benefit or to have it have a consequence for them. But the reason we have systems is so that people use them. If we take away their right or their ability or their possibility of using a system, we've lost so much. And so I do think a jury trial holds people accountable. I do think that the the number of people who will flip this on us, just like I said last week, I think is small. And it may happen. And I would rather not test this in appellate court. I would rather us do the right thing now. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Daniel. Counselor Brawls, followed by Counselor Hensley and Counselor Griego.
Well, it's pretty brief. I appreciate the testimonies and I've heard enough, knowledgeable testimony tonight that I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this ordinance. So I would not be in favor of approving this ordinance at this time with this language.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Brawls. Counselor Hensley and Counselor Griego.
And I just wanted to add real quick, because that was my whole point, was the idea that it wasn't so much the jury trial, but that it was a different consequence if you called a jury trial. And I didn't make that clear. I kind of was carrying on from the last time. And so just wanted to add that it was my concern is that the consequence could be different. And I just don't think that's right.
Okay, Counselor Griego and then Counselor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. It's, I've been here for a while and it's good to know that people do pay attention to council on certain issues because this is the first time I see that, especially attorneys coming before us and arguing something like this. But a lot of people do abuse it. But just as Counselor Hensley says, there is a few that would get caught up in this what we say abusing the system. And three jury trials, are we saying that's just a sign that it's going to increase more and more?
Well, I have no way to know that. Prior to and we've only had two, there's a third one scheduled for the end of October. Prior to the end, or prior to this year, I was talking with the city clerk and she said she hadn't done one. And she's been the city clerk for 5 years.
6 years as city clerk and 3 as deputy.
So it could be something anomalous about this year. I can't even speculate.
And one of the attorneys mentioned, and I kind of agree too, that if it does start getting out of hand, what is it to move it to county court? Do we want to start doing stuff like that, or we just?
It'll just get dismissed.
Yeah.
County court won't deal with these small petty offenses.
So we'd be sending the wrong message there by doing stuff like that. So I totally agree that, even though that some people take advantage of the system, but I feel that the law's the law, and if it says that you're entitled to a jury trial, I think, if it means 3 jury trials or 15, whatever it takes, I still feel that they have that right, and I'm not comfortable with this ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Griego. Counselor Vihil, then Counselor Carson.
I'm just a high school history teacher, so when I hear all these attorneys talking, it's like, but I do teach civics and government. And I know this council has done a lot over the last few years to get past those ACLU issues. And if it's 3 this year and 1 next year, we just don't know. Like you said, Mr. Suisa, I still think a person has a right to trial by jury, and I don't want to take that away, and I don't want it to go to an appeal process, and I don't want to have nothing to deal with that. And if we have to put more funding towards the court system for that, if those come about, then we need to look at that. But that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Vihil. Counselor Carson.
I listen to lawyers all the time, and this was a little mind-numbing. But with that being said, I move that we decline to approve the ordinance on first reading and give staff further direction, especially concerning bringing the ordinance into line with state law concerning right to jury trials in municipal courts.
Second.
We have a motion, second. Any further discussion? Oh, hold on 1 second. Let's make sure you got a legal motion. Okay, I think he has a comment real quick.
Right. So the question or the comment that I have is clearly you want to strike section 2 of the ordinance as presented. Section 1 is the one that deals with bringing the language of our current code into line with requirements of state statute. But it does omit, as I mentioned earlier, dealing with section 13-57 of our code. It deals with section 1-18 sub E sub 4. So I've drafted language as I was listening with you guys with one ear that would deal with section 13-57, but I'm quite content to have you not approve this ordinance and bring a different one back to you that deals with that, or you could deal with that tonight with this language, and it really doesn't matter to me. I don't think there's any rush.
So if you wanted to deal with it tonight, you could have him read the language for section 1 and only approve section 1, not section 2, which everyone seems to be against.
I would almost move that we table it.
Well,
It's gonna take another hour just because, and not for the sake of time, just so that we can absorb it and deal with it correctly. Because right now, if we continue to jab at it, I'm almost kind of confused at this point. So I would almost move that we table it, let him come back to it. Go ahead.
so I don't think that we need to table it. I think we can decline the motion as you moved. And then Eric can come back, sorry, Counselor Sweezow can come back with just the second piece or the first piece, because I don't remember which section it is now.
And you know what? I would have so moved that if he hadn't continued to talk, because I didn't understand if that was gonna change that. I would have just so moved the first thing he said. And that's why I'm saying, because right now we've got, it's a little bit muddy.
So I think
And I think that's what your motion was,
Yes.
Counselor Carson. So I was just saying we could deal with it tonight if council wanted to, but I'm certainly quite content to bring it as a completely different ordinance.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think council want to deal with tonight. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other further discussion? Okay, if not, let's start. Yes.
Mayor, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just need clarification on this because first he motions not to even go with this
We're declining it either way.
Everything, I think.
and then now are we changing that motion's on the table, right?
So for clarification purposes, let's go ahead and make sure we're clear. Go ahead and you want to restate your motion?
No, I'd rather have him restate it and I'll move, honestly, because it got muddied. So go ahead and restate it, Eric, and then I'll move.
Turn myself off. I apologize for that, Counselor Carson. I think your motion was clear. So let me restate it. I think the motion is that you deny or disapprove ordinance number 18-2021 and give staff further direction to bring a different ordinance to council that addresses the inconsistency between the existing ordinances and state statute as found in section 1-18E4 and 13-57 sub B.
Thank you for that clarification. That's exactly what Councilor Carson said.
That's what I heard him say.
Okay, we have a motion, second, no further discussion.
I'm gonna
Let's
say
go ahead
something.
and,
When I ran for office 4 years ago, a very wise man told me, never pass up a good opportunity to keep your mouth shut.
thank you, Councilor Carson. All right, so let's start voting, please.
So you want to vote yes to turn it down?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes on the motion.
Yes on the motion.
okay,
The motion carried unanimously.
thank you. All right, let's move on down this agenda to a public hearing and second reading for ordinance number 16-2021, an ordinance amending the established pay plan for city officers and employees in accordance with Article 3, Section 11 of the Charter as referred to in Section 15-2 of the Code of Ordinances concerning personnel rules and regulations and pay plan for city officers and employees.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to keep this short. We have had a work session and a first reading on this, and we're at 9:13 tonight. But just in a quick summary, the last compensation analysis that the city conducted was in 2015. This past year, we did hire an outside consultant to take a look at what our market is for all the positions within the city. We identified 27 comparable organizations, Employees filled out a 13-page position questionnaire. And all of that analysis was brought together and presented both to employees and city council on August 25th. Following that, employees were allowed to appeal if they felt either their title or their placement was incorrect. We did review those appeals. They were initially reviewed by the supervisor, human resources, city manager, and then sent to the consultant. The consultant issued those recommendations, and the ordinance tonight factors in those appeals. The implementation of the plan includes 3 different types of pay increases. The first type of pay increase is to get the employee to at least the minimum pay of their new grade. The second pay increase is because of compression. We have not been able to give pay related to performance since 2018, which then means we have employees grouped towards the beginning of their pay grades. And so the second type of pay increase would be related to the number of years that the employees have worked to try to get more senior employees separated from less senior employees. And then finally, since we only did a 1.5% increase this year, and this is the only increase for 2022, we wanted to ensure if there's any employee that is receiving less than 2%, that they would be guaranteed at least 2%. As indicated before, the city manager and municipal judge are not in the pay plan, but the study did determine that we are within the ranges. So this increase would only give us based on our years of service, and the ordinance does address these 2 positions. Finally, the fiscal impact, we have adjusted it since the appeals, is $463,447. But since we didn't do the full 3% this year, and we would probably be doing a 3% next year, this net cost for the new market adjusted pay plan is just about $172,000. Finally, it would be effective January 1st of 2022. And we did look 10 years into the future to make sure we can sustain this with a 4% escalator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so at this particular time, I am going to open it up for a public hearing for second reading of ordinance number 16-2021. If you have anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments, please come up to the podium. Okay, I don't see anyone in the audience. Ms. Martinez, will you please open up the Zoom and give instructions of how Zoom attendees can raise their hands to participate in this public hearing?
Yes, sir. So if you're on the Zoom app, just use the raise your hand button to raise your hand. And if you're on a telephone, it'll be *9. Mayor, I do not see anybody raising their hand.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised either. So I would now officially close the public hearing, bring it back to council for discussion. Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
I just want to offer kudos and thanks to city staff and that group that we hired to do this study. I'm really, really happy I'm going to vote yes on this, and because I think we need to pay people better, and we're doing that. This addresses that. I'm glad that we take care of our employees and that we keep doing these studies every few years to see where we're at with the market and other comparables and that. Everybody who works for us is important, and they're all a piece of the puzzle. But I just do want to highlight, just because of the national narrative out there, that people think that we are, not us, but there's this thing out there that defund the police and taking money away from the police, and that is not the case here in Alamosa. I'm glad to say that our police are going to get a decent bump out of this pay rate, and it's going to make our police, it's going to help out with turnover. We're going to be able to retain our police officers here in Alamosa. That's very important. I'm glad that we're a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil. Councilor Griego.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a lot of what Councilor Vigil said. We need to be fair with our employees, and if they're getting paid better somewhere else, the retention, we've got some good people that work for the city and they do work hard. One question I did have is, there was an appeal process on some of this stuff. Were those covered and do we reach some kind of agreement with those people?
Yes, sir. The results of the appeal have been communicated to the employees. And if there were any changes, not all of the appeals were successful, but for those that were, we made those changes and incorporated it into this reading.
And thank you, Heather, for taking care of the employees, because like I said, I keep emphasizing, I've been here maybe too long, but it's important that we continue. And what is it, every 3 years that we're going to look at this, or 5 years, or
Probably closer to 5.
5 years? Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, you're welcome, Councilor Grego. Okay, Council, let me see, okay, Councilor Vio.
Then I'll move that we approve on second reading ordinance number 16-2021.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I don't see any lights on the mic. Once again, thank you, staff, for everything, and I appreciate you considering our employees. Go ahead and get ready to start voting. I think we're missing one. Okay. All right.
The motion carried unanimously.
Great, thank you. That brings us to first reading of ordinance number 19, 2021, and ordinance making the annual appropriations for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know it's 9/21, but this is our first reading of a budget that's about $33 million. And so I am going to do it a little bit different to use the PowerPoint that we had prepared for the public, because I do think it provides some good visuals for City Council and for anyone who is still with us tonight. So Holly, if you could advance the slide, please. These first ones I'm going to go over. We know our vision and mission, so we can click past this one. This is our org chart where we have created the development services and economic development are the newest boxes. The next one. So for our focus areas, if you look at some of what the major initiatives are in the budget, this is how I would say they probably they line up. That's not to say this is council's priorities per se, if we were to say rate 1 through 10. But if you look at where some of the additional funding and efforts are going, public safety, especially with that co-responder program that we're looking at modifying or creating. Housing, with the completion of our housing plan, we're going from near zero activity in housing to significant activity in housing. Our infrastructure, a lot of our enterprise funds, the streets, all of that infrastructure investment that's being made. We continue to be focusing on economic development, and we're never, ever going to leave out the outdoor recreation, especially with that being the #1 priority in the comp plan to activate the river. I don't think Andy'd be happy if I didn't continue to mention that one. Holly, if you want to go to the next one. You guys know we do have the different funds. You have the general fund, enterprise, the new street trust fund, community rec, and then a bunch of little funds. Holly, if you want to go to the next one. And then when you take a look at these major funds, I don't know, can you move that little box, Holly, there? Yeah. You can see, the general fund is about 13. Oh, never mind. We won't be moving. Oh, yay. The general fund was about 13.5. The enterprise is about, it's hard for me to see that, so I'm going to look at my own real fast. Is about 6.2 million. The street trust fund, we're expecting revenue of about a little over 2 million. The community rec, almost 3 million. And all the other special funds combined, about 4.2. Oh, Okay. Yes, there we go. There's our revenues. So there's the breakdown of the revenue. So total revenue we're anticipating is about 28.7 million. So if we go to the next slide, which is the expenditures, there we go. They are similar, but you will see total revenue was 28.7. Our expenditures are 32.5. That is because we are spending down that fund balance. It's also because, with the ARPA funding, the financing we did for the water augmentation plan, we're hopefully going to get a chunk of those expenses done in 2022, those types of things. If you go to the next slide. As a reminder for the public, the general fund pays for police, fire, park maintenance, street maintenance, a portion of the library, court, and overall administration. Public safety and street maintenance represent the largest percentage of expenses for this fund. The revenue comes from a 2% sales tax, a 1.2% sales tax, and about $540,000 in property taxes. So if you go to the general fund, the next slide, here's how the revenue comes in. You can see sales tax is about 67%. So that's why we monitor that closely. Holly, if you go to the next slide. Here's the graph to show from a general fund, the different departments and divisions. And so you've got police admin, economic, IT, non-departmental, HR, street maintenance is the green, the 2 million, fire is 964,000. So you can see the pie chart and all the different divisions that the general fund does provide support for. Holly, the next one. The enterprise fund are the city utilities, which are water, wastewater, and sanitation. Monies received from the payment of utility bills is what funds this. Holly, if you can go to the next. So here's a breakdown. It also has East Alamosa, transfers in, recycling revenue, as well as the utility rates. You go to the next one, Holly. For expenditures, this is how each of those divisions. So water department's about 3 million, sewer department's about 2.5, sanitation's about 1.3. Holly, if you can go to the next one. The street trust fund is our new one. It comes from a 0.5% sales tax and the 500,000 that we promised to transfer from the general fund. Holly, if you'd like to go to the next one. So this pie chart just simply shows the sales tax and that 500,000 from the general fund. And then as you might remember, it funds 3 different things. The purple is the reconstruction of those streets. The red is when we're doing those overlays, and then the orange is the concrete replacement. Holly, if you want to go to the next one. The community recreation fund funds a lot based on just the little bit of revenue that does come in. It includes the library, the family recreation center, the ice rink multi-purpose building, trails, and numerous team sports, indoor and outdoor recreational activities for adults and children. It is a 0.5 cent dedicated sales tax. So Holly, if you go to the next slide, you can see that's where the different revenue comes from, interdepartmental, very dependent on sales tax, some for charges for services. You can see the golf revenue is now included in there. Holly, if you want to go to the next. We are looking at about 3.2 million of expenditures between library, community recreation, and golf course. The capital improvement projects, we have anticipated about $2.9 million for streets. In the enterprise fund, we will have about $3.6 million. For fleet, we will have about 1.5. For IT, 13,000. For facilities, 442. Non-departmental is about 100,000. And Parks and Rec will have capital improvements of about 85,000. So this is a very significant amount of money. Holly, if you can go to the last one. We always like to talk about as well, going aggressively after grants and donations. You can see 2021 with the ARPA and the CARES funding, but there was also still a lot of grants that we went after to try to use what we could to pivot with the COVID situation. And so Holly, you can get out of the presentation now. The major items that I wanted to share is we did hold a public meeting on September 9th. Unfortunately, no one came. I do think with the new software that we've purchased, that we can do a better job from an educational perspective, and it'll be more user-friendly for the public to utilize some of that. So we'll continue to take a look at that. Overall, we're anticipating sales tax to increase about 3% based on the 10-year average. The new pay plan does cover, it is about a 7% increase. We do have in there that we decreased our payment in lieu of taxes in anticipation that we will reach an IGA with the Alamosa Housing Authority. So that is still something to be decided, but those discussions are ongoing. We also have $450,000 in there as a pass-through for the CDBG Early Childhood Project. So it's a partnership with a community group. We do have significant chunks of ARPA already identified to be utilized next year, which is included in the budget. From a personnel perspective, we did add the additional IT technician, and Monta Vista is looking at that agreement now from an approval perspective. To give an understanding of why I listed law enforcement, at the top, we have $545,703 for lead for next year from an expense. We also have almost $200,000 for Department of Justice pass-through grants. That's the other arm of the referral into lead. And then we obviously have another $100,000 for the co-responder program. And so there's some significant efforts that we are putting into those areas. We also, from a personnel perspective, looked at helping our parks department better meet the demand. We keep growing our parks and our trails, and the demand from the public to have those be safe and clean is high. And so we wanted to make sure they had the personnel that they needed to maintain those. The utility rates are increased per the 2018 ordinance that council's already passed. Those rates are 5% for water, 8% for sewer, 6% for sanitation. And then on the street trust fund, we do obviously still have the $500,000 that's going forward. I know it's important for council for us to point out that because sales tax has overperformed and our costs have maintained at a competitive rate, we were able to move the second phase of State Avenue forward. So instead of that second phase occurring in 2023, the whole state that was identified, not the whole street, but the whole sections that were identified will occur in 2022. Overall, following the last work session, we did make some changes that I wanted to point out. We did move forward as much of the capital projects in the general fund as we felt we could. There's some in regards to fleet that honestly, the equipment can perform for another few years. It's not necessarily time to replace it. And then when it comes to some of the facility projects, we couldn't necessarily move everything because it's a workload issue. Staff has to be able to do competitive processes, manage the project, or sometimes do the project, depending on what those are. But what we did move forward is about $504,000 of projects we moved forward. But then as we were looking at it, we caught that in the 2026, we did not have the third vehicle for patrol because we do two, then three type of thing. So we did increase 2026 by $54,900 for that third patrol. And we felt that our levy estimate was a little too low. So we added another $100,000 to the levy. So in total, the CIP from the last work session changed by, it shifted 504 and we added 154,000. There was also comments at the last work session that maybe we were being too conservative on what our fund balance is going to be ending this year. And so our finance director did take a look at that. And if we project out how the sales tax is performing now, we do feel comfortable adding 500,000 to the starting fund balance to that 10-year plan. So we did make that adjustment. The last year in the 10-year plan, is still showing a tiny bit below. So staff's opinion is we do not have the ability to add more into that 10-year plan. So with that, I will turn it over to council for any questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll recognize you by your lights being on. Okay. Go ahead, Counselor Vio.
Yeah, a question on that ARPA funding, Heather, is that money that we were gonna get, was that maybe given to us by the help of our congressmen and senators, or was that the city of Alamosa, you fall on this bracket and you're gonna get this much?
It was a mathematical formula determined by the federal government.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I have one.
Counselor Gray.
I appreciate the fact that we're taking this out to the community and trying to let the people know what exactly we're doing with how the money's and stuff like that. It's sad that nobody comes. So if you can, like you say, use other measures to get it out there, I'm sure we have an issue, and we had tons of attorneys going. I don't know why people won't see something like this is so important, you know, this kind of money that we're dealing with and the projects that we're dealing with. It's so, I don't know what it takes to get people involved in that, but you did a great job, you and your staff, and maintain that the budget the way it is and the way you presented it. So thank you.
Counselor Hensley.
So I would say also, I think you definitely listened to a lot of feedback from us, and it is too bad the community doesn't get more involved, but I think it's a great budget. I also like the fact that when we talk about resources, so we have the financial resources, we have the human resources as well, and the value of those human resources. And one of the things that I really appreciate that you're balancing is that we don't want to, just like we don't want to overspend our money, we don't want to overuse or wear out or burn out our employees and our staff as well. And so I just always want that to be looked at and appreciate that you're looking at that, and that we don't want to overwork or overstress. Even if we have the money to do certain projects, we may not have the capability from that sense. So thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All right, so somebody needs to make a motion.
Now, if there's no further comments, I'll make the motion. We passed on first reading ordinance number 19, 2021, and set it for a public hearing on October 20th at 7 o'clock or soon thereafter.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Not. Please start voting.
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, committee reports. We have Counselor Vio, committee reports.
Yeah, a quick one from the library board. Circulation is increasing over the last few months. There's a new 3D printer getting ready to use for public use. Those are really growing across the country. There's around 20,000 in grants coming in. They're working on a new website. 800 people total attendance at the 2021 story times. That's phenomenal. So thank you to Andy and everybody at the library for doing a great job.
Thank you, Counselor Vio. Counselor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two. I attended the lead policy meeting in mid-September. And at that time we had reviewers in town. I participated in an interview. We'll be getting that data back, but I have heard from both the Office of Behavioral Health and the CU, I think it's CU people that were here, or a university up north that was interviewing us and gathering the data, that they're really impressed with what we do, as always. I mean, I think it just continues to be something very helpful for our community. So I was really excited to be a part of that, and things seem to be going well with the LEAD program. I also attended the Housing Authority meeting at the end of last month. And one of the things that came out is that they will be reaching out to Eric if they have not already done so for assistance with the bylaws, because some of the changes that they wanted to make changes to were by statute, like, and we know about the statute pieces, so Anna was going to reach out to you about that. And then I know that they were also looking at discussing the appointments and term limits and things like that, that we had asked them to review. So they held an executive session, and I know we're discussing some of the things that they'd like to bring back to the city with that, but they're doing great work at the Housing Authority. I think there's some really cool things happening. The Tenant Advisory Board is really self-policing, and I think that's been really a positive thing for them, really helping to kind of maintain some of the challenge, like work with some of the challenges they were experiencing and holding their neighbors accountable. So I think that part is going really, really well.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Daniel. Okay, so I don't see any other lights on, so we'll move on down the agenda. Next item is staff announcement.
Well, it's only 9:40, so I just want to remind everyone, we do have a
You gonna
work.
take it to midnight, Heather? or-
I know. We have a work session next week. It's on the opioid items. And so I do think it's going to be a fairly meaty, not controversial or anything like that, but a lot of information. And so we're looking forward to getting everybody caught up on that. And then Friday, the 15th is the monthly cleanup out at St. Benedict. So I do have some clothings to help pick up trash, and I can help loan those out if anyone wants to join me. That's the only updates that I have.
Okay, and I know you mentioned that meeting next week. I'm gonna ask Mayor Pro Tem Vigil to run that one because I'll be attending the Housing Now Conference as a part of my employment responsibilities. Next week, yep, next Wednesday, the work session. Okay, all right, staff announcements. I'm sorry, we got that. Council comments. Yeah, I recognize Councilor Vigil, then Councilor Grego, then Councilor Daniel.
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to recognize that it's Alamosa High School's homecoming week. And this Friday is obviously the homecoming game, but they're also going to recognize the 20-year anniversary of their latest football state championship at 6:30 before the game there at the parking lot at the high school. And finally, also just want to communicate to folks that in the San Luis Valley region, there are 305 active cases of COVID. Not to scare anybody, but just it's out there, and do what you got to do to be careful because it's everywhere. The regional positivity rate is 10.41%. And Alamosa County has 103 cases. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil. Okay, Councilor Grego.
Thank
and
you, Mayor.
Councilor Daniel.
I just wanted to point out on the public hearing we had on this jailable offense where one of the attorneys made the comment that that they basically that our how do I put it out there? Our legal system isn't really working well. Well, I totally trust our legal system. And I know what Eric, he doesn't walk on water, but anyway, he does a great job for the city. And I can honestly sit here and say, I totally trust him with handling the city business. And if it stirs up people like this, well, it's good that they're getting involved with what's going on in this community. But I totally trust you with what you do, both as city attorney and as prosecutor.
Thank you, Councilor Grego. Yeah, Councilor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to the staff and the team for this was a huge meeting. There was a lot that happened. So thank you for being prepared, being professional, having everything ready to go. We made a lot of decisions today. And so I just want to acknowledge that, and the Main Street recommendations and the work put into that. I know it took a little longer than some people were hoping for. And I believe that it is a really good decision and a really decent compromise. So thank you for that. Also, to kind of piggyback off of what Counselor Griego said, I really appreciate Counselor Suizao, your ability to handle the feedback that was given. Feedback is a light word for what was happening today. I just want to say thank you for your professionalism, and I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the work that you put into the things you present to us. And so I wanted to share that and to just thank the team and the staff and everyone for our CML conference. I feel like it went very well. I feel like we had really good bonding moments. I really appreciated all the work to get us there, but also the things we did while we were there as a team. So thank you everyone for all of the work you're doing.
Thank you, Counselor Daniel. Counselor Hensley.
And I also would like to ditto just that I do truly appreciate everything you do. I think you do a great job. And, I guess you went with what you felt was right. And sometimes it goes the way we think and sometimes it doesn't. And so I hope that you continue to always, if you feel there's something to bring forward to us, to continue to do that. Because a lot of times it's the thing that we actually are seeing that we agree with. Every now and then it may not be, but we value what you bring to us. And so I just want you to know we do truly appreciate it. And then on a side note is that next week, we won't have a meeting before that, is Adam State's homecoming as well. And obviously it's the 100th birthday or anniversary. So there's a lot of events happening. The goal, I think, from what I hear, is to be one of the longest parades. So we'll see if that happens. But anyway, just hope everybody has a good time also for that.
Thank you, Counselor Hensley. Okay, I don't see any other lights lit up on the mic, so I'll go ahead and wrap things up. I just want to say thank you to Holly and her staff, the Valley Courier, KSBK Radio, Alamosa County Chamber, and all of the participants who participated in the Meet the Candidate Forum. Yesterday, we heard a lot of good, positive feedback from the candidates, and the community had an opportunity to ask the questions that they wanted to hear from the candidates. So thanks to everyone who made that possible. Okay, no other further comments? This meeting is adjourned.
Let it go.